Julia.
Yes.
It's so good to have you on my podcast.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening or watching, Julia is a transformational coach and someone that I have personally worked with for a couple of years now, I guess. I feel like your work is mostly with couples, and you have such incredible insights on love and why things work and why things don't. But I feel like you have such a unique approach, which is why I always really liked working with you. And in the spirit of full disclosure, Julia coached me and my ex-husband. And, you know, it even though that didn't work out, it was really, I learned so much. I mean, you know, I learned so much from that relationship in general, and even in the aftermath, you and I kept working together, and that was incredibly helpful to me. So anyways, we'll get into all that. Julia, welcome to the Messy Truth podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. So, well, before we get into it all, how did you get into this work? Let's start there.
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah. It's really at the heart of why I do what I do. I was a mess. I was a complete mess.
You fit right in here with all of us.
I looked great on the outside. You know, I had everything that supposedly anyone wants to have. And yet I realized I felt really empty. And my husband was depressed, and I couldn't get him undepressed. And so I really started doing my own soul searching and really realizing that the relationship you have with yourself sets the foundation for every other relationship that you have.
I mean, let's just take a pause for that soundbite. The relationship that you have with yourself
sets the tone for every other relationship you have.
Yeah, it only took me like 49 years to learn that lesson. Yeah, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going, sorry.
Yeah, and I basically began to realize that the suffering of how I was processing the suffering of my past was really bringing me to strive and turn myself into a machine, to where there was no meaning in my life. There was no meaning in my relationships. Of course, I was doing quote unquote meaningful things and had wonderful clients. I was a photographer and loved what I did, but it just felt like Groundhog's Day. And every day felt the same. And I was like, if there's not more to life than this, then...
How many years ago was this?
This was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I just really started searching. My searching started actually with a therapist telling me, so my husband and I owned a photography business together, and we were traveling internationally. It was everything that he had dreamed it would be. And then he was like no longer really interested in it. And so I'm like, okay, I think you need a career coach. So I'm going to hire her and sit in on the sessions with you. And after 3 sessions,
you need to get fixed. Yeah.
After 3 sessions, she said, okay, I'm done here. And she goes, Julia, you need to read Codependent No More. And I was like, okay, I don't like this at all. And the subtitle is Stop Controlling Others and Start Loving Yourself. And
so good.
It rocked my world. It really began. I did not realize what a facade I had created, to where I had learned to be happy in any circumstances, quote unquote happy. So I really didn't realize how miserable I was and how codependent. I had never heard of codependency before. I didn't realize how dysfunctional my husband and I's relationship was.
Yeah.
And that really began to expose a lot. And that led to the next thing and the next thing. And then I came into contact with Dan Tacchini in one of his workshops 12 years ago here in LA. And that began the whole work of, you know, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me in that 4-day training was he said, I got the sense that I could change my legacy. And that blew my mind. If I had the power to change my legacy, I wanted to know how to do that. And so I began doing this work on my own for my own journey. And I did a lot of coaching or consulting photographers. And I sold my company, and I was having some challenges with my teenage son. I couldn't figure out what I was doing to block the connection I wanted. So I wound up doing Dan's leadership training, which also certified you to be a coach. And it was in the middle of that I'm like, oh, oh, my people that I'm consulting, they're not raising their prices or not advertising to get who they want because they don't know how. It's because their beliefs. And so I began working with them on changing their beliefs, and they started asking me, well, look, would you coach me personally? And then I started coaching couples and found a real niche, and my heart came alive with couples, and that's
It's interesting, you know, I feel like you've said similar things to me about like beliefs, you know, if I feel like you hear this a lot as like the limiting beliefs. I feel like that's something you've said to me a lot. Because I think that, you know, it's just, you know, interesting how we, you know, how much we undervalue what we believe is like what we become, right?
Yes.
And I feel like, you know, for me, you know, learning, it's so funny when you're in the midst of something, how it's so hard to see it. And then once you can zoom out, it's so much easier. But yeah, you know, I think that, I guess the question for you is like, you know, how do you get like a couple to see what they can't see? You know? Yeah. Well, but the reason I'm asking you it like that is because I feel like, and I don't know how to like get into this, but it's like, I feel like when we've had calls, I feel like you always really challenge me. And I've assumed that you probably do that to everybody, where it's like, you know, you one of the things that I've always loved about working with you is like, you never let me get fucking away with anything, which is kind of annoying.
You let me know how much you didn't like that a few times.
Yeah. Well, because it's like, you know, I'm like, no, Julia, here's what he did. And here's my story around what he did. And I knew from working with you that you would never, you know, let me sit in that like victim mentality. And it's just like, I think it's so our human nature to be like, I was wronged, you know, and I think one of the big things, and this is kind of like I'm saying, is like, how do you get couples to this point? Because I know now, and maybe it's just through work and self-awareness, that like, you know, my culpability is really there. And, you know, you and I obviously talked a lot about the breakup of me and Adrian and how, you know, I was always wanting you to like agree with me and be on my side, you know, about what he did wrong. And I think what you really helped me see was like, what I can control, what is my part, what is my piece of it. So I guess when you're working with couples, because I can't say I saw it quite as much when we were working as a couple, but I see it now.
Yeah.
You know, I was so rigid and so needed to be right. And I mean, it'll be interesting in my next relationship to try it out, you know, but now I see it pretty clearly looking back.
Yeah.
So like when you're in it,
We don't see it.
yeah. I mean, so how do you get people to that, you know?
It's really their own desires, because when I work with couples, and I work with a lot of individuals as well, right?
Yeah.
It's really, people come to me because they don't have the love they want. And they get pretty quickly that my whole come from is, well, you get to take responsibility for the love that you want.
Yes.
Because it is your responsibility. And so...
She's very like Byron Katie-ish, and I know you always really like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate what she does a lot. So it's really, I can't get a couple to see it. I can't get, because really, even when I work with a couple, I'm working with the individuals within the relationship. So, and often I let go of clients because they don't want to see it. And
Really? You often let go of clients?
I often let go of clients, yes.
Wow.
Because
What will
my
you say to them?
commitment to them is to love them.
Yeah.
And I say, look, you've hired me to help you see what you don't want to see. And I totally get that that's not easy to do. And what's going to happen is, if I keep inviting you to see something you don't want to see, then you're going to resent me. And you're actually going to, you know, use these tools that I'm giving you to do more harm. Because I give people surgical tools. The tools that I teach are surgery for the heart, to cut away our selfishness, to cut away our victim mindset, to cut away the things that are blocking us from the love that we long for. And so if they don't want to use the tools that way, they'll start using them on their spouse, and they become vicious weapons. And I won't do that. I won't put the surgical tools in their hands to use on someone else if they're not willing to use them on themselves.
Wow. Okay, so some of the tools are?
Tools are things like looking at, where am I in a victim mindset? Looking at what is, let me think of some of the ones that would be really simple to understand.
Way to put you on the spot, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, because I'm curious, like how you look at that, like, you know, what we would do, what tools would be helpful to us, but be victim or you know, hurt.
Yep.
Our spouse.
So a really, really simple one. One of the things I talk a lot about is working in your backyard. So I look at marriage like a neighborhood, and you are neighbors with fenced-in yards, and in each of your yard is your thoughts, your beliefs, your responses, your reactions, your tones. All of that is in your backyard. But we often stand at the fence of our spouse's backyard, pointing out all of the things in their backyard. Like, we'll look at your intentions here, look at your motives there, look at, you know, you shouldn't do this or you should do that, whatever. And so the whole time, our backs are turned to our fence, to our yard, and we don't see our tones, our attitudes, right? So ultimately, a spouse who's not using the tools on themselves, they're standing at that fence, and they've become much more articulate in communicating, like, well, you know you shouldn't be doing this, and I can tell that, you know, this is what you're doing, and your motives are off and your motives are wrong. And it's really interesting when I listen to couples, sometimes they will get into an argument, and I'll hear them start using the language, which is the tools, against their spouse, and telling their spouse what they're doing or what they're not doing. And I'm like, no, you were not given those tools to tell them what to do. They're for you to look at what you're up to.
Yeah.
They're your garden tools for your garden. They're not to be used in their garden.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's so simple, right? Like, it seemingly, right? It's simple, and that's why I'm saying it's interesting when you're single and you're working on this stuff, because you're like, oh yeah, no, I get it, I got it, you know. And then you get into a relationship and you have another person, you know, and it's so fascinating to me because I can feel myself, you know, go into like almost like a completely different headspace of like, oh, I want to be right here, you know, instead of like, I want to make this thing work. Yeah. You know, which I think is pretty common, right? It
is. And we don't recognize that like 90% of our core beliefs were developed in the first 1,000 days of our life.
Isn't that trippy? 90% of our core beliefs were the first 1,000 days of our life.
Yeah, from conception to 2 years old.
3 years, almost. How many?
Conception to 2.
2. I remember you telling me that.
First 1,000 days of our life. And so our core beliefs are core beliefs because they were developed through felt experiences, right? We didn't have cognitive thought in the way of like, oh, I can see my mom is angry and she's angry at me and this is why she's angry, right? It's just like, oh, she's angry, and then I'm going to feel that feeling of anger, and it must be, you know, whatever. So relationship, that's why committed relationship is so valuable, because it's the greatest mirror life offers to help us see where these beliefs get triggered, these limiting beliefs get triggered. And they don't get as triggered when we're just living life on our own. But when we're living day in, day out with someone, especially that we were attracted to, because we attract someone who's going to feel comfortable, meaning they're going to help us keep recreating our past, because our past is what's most comfortable to us. So we attract a person in that will actually trigger those sore spots.
Just so trippy. Like, how does that happen?
It's subconscious. It's our belief systems and how they're wired. We know that this person will keep, you know, letting us get away with what our parents let us get away with, and, you know.
You know, it's funny, my son loves Jordan Peterson, and I know you follow him and know him.
Yeah, I love Jordan Peterson.
And Grant sent me this, like, little snippet, and I'm sure I'm not completely interpreting this right, but he was talking about the subconscious, because you brought up the subconscious, which I'm really fascinated by these days. And how, again, I don't think this was the actual translation, but like the subconscious is, I mean, this was a little bit more of a God thing. Like, is our subconscious like God coming through? And, you know, and I don't know, but it's interesting. But what do you believe the subconscious is? Like, if that's true, and our subconscious is drawing us a partner that reminds us subconsciously of our parents or how we were treated, like, what? Why? Like, it's so heady, it's so trippy, you know?
It is. Yeah. A lot of deep thought.
Yeah.
My sense is that I think we are spirit, soul, and body. And so I believe that subconscious is more that spirit and that soul that drives our life towards evil or towards good. And we are drawn that way. And the more we feed that villain within us, the more our subconscious is drawing us towards, evil. I had no idea that one of my core beliefs was that I'm not valuable or worthy. When you look at the
You
first...
said you had no idea.
I had no idea.
But that I don't understand either. Like, people, I keep seeing that. Like, people saying that, like, oh, I realize, like, I'm not enough. I realize I'm not enough. It's like, but you're like, I didn't know it.
Right.
And then how did you know it?
Well, through this work is where I began to uncover it. And because I looked at the results of my life. The results of our life, our results is the only thing that doesn't lie. So when I began to look at the results of my life, and especially in the quiet places, like when Jeff, my husband, would do something that I would get really hurt, I started listening much more closer to the quiet, that subtle voice inside. And the subtle voice was saying, see, I knew it. You're not worthy of love. See, no one really can love you. And I just never listened like that. But once I thought about it and stopped and thought, what might the core belief of my life be, or the core lie, then I was like, wow, I can see through my childhood. I can see every time in school. I can see so many things when I felt I messed up or had failed or wasn't perfect. It all came back to me not being worthy of love. But that belief drove so much of what I did. And I set things up. Subconsciously, I would set things up.
To be right about that.
To be right. That, see, I'm not worthy. So when, my husband came to me one day and said, there's another woman. And I could see how, when I took responsibility to do the deeper work, like what had led us to this point. We didn't get here by accident. We didn't get here just 100% on his choice.
Sorry. Oh, I forgot my housekeeper is coming today. Hi, Nancy. Sorry.
I knew that we hadn't just gotten there by accident.
Yeah.
I knew that I had played some part in it, right? And so...
But let's back up for a second, because I know I didn't have a shock value to you saying that, because I know that about you, because we've talked about that. But surely that wasn't your initial. And I feel like I know this from talking to you about it.
Yeah.
Because, for somebody who's dealing with something like that, you're very calm about it. Like, my husband came in and told me there's another woman, and you didn't immediately think, why? Like, where's my part in this? Which I know you've got to from our conversations. But I guess I think it'd just be interesting and really helpful for people, because I think there's probably this societal belief that if your husband cheats, you leave him. He's an asshole, he cheated, fuck him. Or for a lot from my work with you, I realized that it's not always that black and white.
Right.
So walk me through how you got to that very calm, what did I do wrong here? And not in the way, I don't think you said it in the way of I deserve to be cheated on necessarily, but more of where's my culpability in an affair happening? Yeah,
because I had started my work a few years before that. So I was so grateful, because there was that part of me that came up that was like, F you, I'm out,
Yeah.
And so thankfully, it was really amazing. God was so close walking through that whole process with me. And somehow I just knew, at first, when he first told me, I couldn't even wrap my head around it. It just felt so...
And you had been married how many years by that point?
Almost 20.
Oh my gosh. It's never like this. Although Amazon did ring my door at 6 a.m. this morning. I was like, don't you guys have some fucking
6
protocol?
a.m.?
Don't ring my doorbell at 6 a.m.
I didn't realize how asleep in life I was. Like I was just so numb. And really my heart had just become so hard. I had let the wounds and the hurt and the offenses just build up and turn my heart to a heart of stone. And so when he shared it with me, my first thing was, I am not going back. I'm not going back to a hard heart. I recognize I'm at a significant crossroads here. I'm either going to keep my heart alive and soft, or I'm going to get really bitter and resentful. And I had grown up watching my grandmother be that way. And as a little girl, I thought, how can someone be that angry and that bitter? And that was one of the things that got me awake, was I started realizing, wow, I'm becoming that version that I saw as a little girl, that I couldn't understand how someone could become that way.
Yeah.
So my first immediate thing was I cried. He told me in the evening, I cried all through the night, and I just kept saying, God, please help me heal. Please help me heal. What do I need to help me heal? And that's all I focused on in the beginning, was just like, I don't know if I want this marriage to work. I can't imagine that I will. But what I do know is I'm committed to healing. And so in that, I knew that I needed two things. I needed him to leave so I could heal, and I needed him to tell the children why he was leaving, because that had been a big part of breaking up the codependency. Is I had covered for him all the time. And so beautiful what the soul knows, right? Like my soul knew what I had no idea I would know, in that he later told me that's what broke him. When he needed to leave the house after telling the kids, that rocked his world to the core, where it woke him up, and he started doing the work, which is, if we had both not done the work, we wouldn't have wound up being together. But who I began to watch him be was someone I'd never, and we knew each other since we were kids. Yeah. He became someone I'd never known before, and I was becoming someone different. And so when I looked to see what had I contributed, one of the first things that Jordan Peterson describes it as, when you wake up to a betrayal, when you find out you've been betrayed, you enter the horrors of the underworld. And I heard that about 6 years after I had walked through this betrayal, and it deeply resonated, because it was just this really weird, like out of body almost experience, and you feel these things, especially in the middle of the night, that you're just like, So one night, I would usually sleep for about an hour or so, and then I would wake up often with tears streaming down my face. And I learned to go to God and say, God, what do you want to talk to me about? And so one night he said, I want you to, I woke up and I was talking to myself. It's so unfair. It's so unfair. And so when I asked God, what do you want to talk to me about? He said, what's unfair? And I said, the way men have hurt me. Men have hurt me my whole life. And he was like, tell me about it. And I talked to God while I typed. So I was typing, and I sensed him asking me to like write out every man who'd hurt me. So I started with my father, and then my brother, and then my cousins and my teachers and, boyfriends, and led all the way up to my husband. And just wrote out all these offenses. And then I heard this still small voice in my heart, which I sensed was God saying, now, will you forgive them? And I was like, what? I did not see that coming. Yeah. And tearfully, I said, yes, I will forgive them. And I fell back asleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I knew I was different. Like, there was such a difference in my heart. And I could tell one of the differences moving forward is I had conversations very different with my husband moving forward. Up until that point, I had actually could see that I hadn't asked questions. I hadn't been honest about different things, because I actually wanted to hold on to the offenses. I wanted to add them to my backpack of offenses so that I could make myself right, that I wasn't worthy of love and men would hurt me. And so I began to show up different in conversations, and could see a lot that it wasn't by chance I hadn't been willing to have those kind of conversations prior to that in the first 20 years, because I actually wanted, in certain ways, subconsciously, I wanted him to betray me, because that would be the biggest proof that, see, I wasn't worthy of love.
It's so interesting. it just made me think of like, I feel like, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I feel like Adrian used to say to me, like, you're gonna leave me and blame, you're gonna be the one who leaves me, but you're gonna blame me. Which I always was like, what does that even mean? Like, I mean, I'm gonna blame you because you were X, Y, and Z, and so I had no choice, you know? But yeah, it's so interesting, and it's like, why are you trying to prove that? Because of the unworthiness, right? Like,
Yeah, because I believe, like, every human being, I believe every one of us is an expression of the divine. And so we live in a world that is good and evil. Every human being is good and evil. And we come into this world as an expression of the divine, meant to be this being of love, this being of life and joy in the world. And at the same time, we're human, so we also have the dark side.
Yeah.
And the dark side of us doesn't want that. Evil doesn't want us to be love in the world. If we can hold on to offenses and believe we're not worthy, believe we're not enough, believe we don't have what it takes, whatever, then we shrink back and we fight against that. Ultimately, I believe every single human has a life work, and every single human has a life sentence. So our life work is that beauty, that essence of the divine that we are in the world. And our life sentence is the war against that. So my experience is, my life work is to invite people into the greatest expression of their love, which I believe on this earth happens in a committed relationship. And yet my life sentence is, you're not worthy of love.
Yeah.
So they war against each other.
Yeah.
And the you're not worthy of love was completely winning and, destroying every relationship
and
I had.
like, I think that you're not worthy is a lot of people's story, right?
There's really only like 7 core beliefs.
Yeah.
It's shocking. It's
not, I was
evil
gonna say,
is not that creative. It's like, I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes.
And this is like, so much of that, like you said, comes from like 0 to 2, like how you were treated, right?
Well, yeah, and how you can watch siblings grow up in a home, and one sibling, they get the same thing, but one sibling takes it in one direction and the other. So a lot of it is what we make up about it, connected to our life work and our life sentence, right? It's not by chance where we go with it.
So what would you tell people as like, a first step of like, because I think, I always come back to this of like, you have tremendous self-awareness, obviously, like you were able to like navigate this affair with your husband and stay together because you were able to, Dusty keeps bringing us sticks, because you were able to see your part in it, and I mean, there's a few questions I have here. It's like, how do you know when like whatever you've done and participated in the demise of whatever is enough to like, I guess to your point, like Jeff had to do the work too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, like you can't just,
like I got really clear on what am I committed to in a committed relationship. And I'm not settling for less than that. And I didn't think that was possible.
Well, and I think
Jeff.
that's the other thing that comes up for me too, is like, are you having an honest conversation? I mean, I think that like, that was something that I think I got to truly probably in both of my divorces, is that, we didn't have some really essential conversations because we were afraid to have them because of what they would have led to.
Yes.
Which is potentially we wouldn't have been together, and like neither one of us wanted that. So we're like, we'll pretend that's not there.
It'll go away. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
And then it becomes the elephant in the room.
Yeah. But which is like, how do you walk that out, of like, you know.
Well, I think we live in an interesting, I think we're steeped in a pot of, the world. And I think if you watch children before they're 5, they're actually pretty self-aware.
Yeah.
And then we start getting wounded, right? We start getting, peers start making fun of us, or we're not accepted, or we're not liked. And we start putting up this shell of self-protection, and we begin to become other-aware. Right? We become less and less self-aware, and we become more and more other-aware, like you're going to hurt me, or you're not going to hurt me. And, we start becoming experts at what other people's motives and intentions and everything else is, which we have no control over, and we really know very little about.
Yeah.
And so it all starts, no matter if you're in a great relationship or one that you can tell there's some suffering here, that there's some elephants we need to deal with, it all starts with self-awareness. We've got to turn back to recognizing that our impact on the world is what's creating the world that we have.
I love that.
And that's where the work starts.
Yeah.
Is becoming self-aware. That's why I say the tools that I use are surgical tools for your heart. If you're only going to use them on other people, you're going to become more resentful and bitter yourself, and create a more poisonous pot that you're steeping in.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's just it feels like potentially such a fine line, because I mean, like, I think about it like you want to protect yourself, like you don't want to let people hurt you, and like, or I think more like walk all over you, right? Like, I think that's where I go into like, is it like weakness, if I'm like, oh, no, this is my fault. Like, I've done this, like, I'm this. And I know that's not what you're saying, but.
Right, because the reason we get walked over, all over, is because we're not self-aware. We're more other aware. Like, we're more focused on what they're up to than ourselves. When I was, in the first 20 years of my marriage, I got walked over in many situations, and I didn't say anything, right? Or there was times that, why would I say something? It helped me be right that, see, I'm not worthy of love. Yeah. Right? It wasn't until I became self-aware that I started being able to say, no, that's not acceptable. This, I won't allow this any longer, right? And so that's what people often think, is that the work that I'm inviting people into is like they'll become a doormat. I'm like, they're a doormat because they're not doing the work, right? When you really become self-aware, you start to recognize, wait, that hurt, or I feel really lonely in this conversation. Why do I feel so lonely? What is happening here? But we miss those signs. Our noticer gets turned off because we're noticing out there rather than noticing in here.
And I've noticed that I'm more aware of that now. Like, when the first thing I ask myself when I get upset about something is like, why am I upset about this? What's going on? Like,
yes.
Which I think it's so much of like the work that I've done in the last year of like, why do I feel fiery, right? What is wrong?
Yes. What am I telling myself?
Right. And then it's like, and then you can kind of start to unpack it. But for most of my life, I would just be fucking mad, and everybody was going to pay for it,
right? Right. Yeah. Because in the past, like, I wouldn't notice that I was upset. I thought it was Jeff that was making me upset, right? You've got to stop doing that because you're making me upset.
Right. You're causing it.
Yeah. And when I started noticing, then I'm like, oh, I'm upset because I'm telling myself I'm not worthy. I'm not giving myself a voice in this conversation. No, I am as worthy as I want to be to show up in this moment. It's my choice to create worth in this moment by being honest, by being vulnerable. And then I'll have the conversation that I needed to have, years ago when I was ignoring it and making it why I was so upset.
I think there's also like, a self-mastery thing here too, like, which I think I had to learn. I'm sure we talked about that over the last year, like being able to enter a conversation in a way that you can talk about these things in a calm manner.
Yes.
Because that was also, I was, my whole life I've been so reactive.
Yes.
And learning to be like, don't respond right now. Take a deep breath. And I just something just happened this past weekend where I was like so frustrated about something, and I felt myself wanting to react right there in the moment, and I was like, nope, I'm not going to do anything right now. I'm not going to do anything right now. And by the time I finally did address it, I was calmer, and it was much easier. The conversation went really smoothly. Yeah. And I was like, this shit really works.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that is years of work of calling you and wanting you to take my side, which I think is a big takeaway here. And it's interesting because you're a coach, a transformational coach, and then there's therapists. And I mean, I've worked with everybody under the sun. But I think the difference at least for me, I feel like the difference in what you do is getting is at least for me, is like, was helping me like get out of my own way and like see where, I'm kind of going back to the other, what did you say?
Other focus.
Other focus than self-focused.
Yeah.
Which is like, if you get nothing else from this podcast, it's like, get that, because I think it's so common. And I also really believe in the like collective of, imagine if everybody was doing this work on themselves.
It'd be a
different world.
Yeah.
We would live in a completely different world, because
Yes.
people wouldn't be so fucking angry.
Yeah.
Very
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I think you mentioned that there's therapists and there's coaches and,
Yeah.
people are like, which one? And I'm like, that's something only you know.
Yeah.
Right? And my experience is, I heard a psychologist one time say that we spend a lifetime healing from our childhood. And I really think that that is true, not whether we had a traumatic childhood or we didn't have a traumatic childhood. It's what those limiting beliefs we picked up in those first 1,000 days, that creates the life that we live. And so the beauty of what I think coaching is unique, because, I'm currently working with a therapist, and we're working to get some of the trauma that's stuck in my body from my childhood that I had no idea I was still carrying. But there's been some things that have brought me to think, oh, okay, I think there's something I want to look at and become more aware of here. And I don't think it's a coaching approach. I think it's a therapy approach. The beauty of what I do with transformational coaching, I think, is that it's really soul-focused in regards to the mind. Like, what am I telling myself? What is this conversation within my head that drives what I'm feeling, what I'm doing, and
as opposed to like
chaos.
therapy, which is more.
I think it's more what's kind of stuck in our body in certain ways.
Yeah.
I think there's all kinds of different therapy.
Yeah,
but, and so it's listening to get so familiar with the beliefs you have that you can rewrite them.
Yeah.
Because when you stop as an adult and you think about what you're telling yourself, like, I'm not worthy of love, that made a lot of sense when I was a kid, and I just went on believing it, because that's how our body works. But when I really sat and thought about it as an adult, I'm like, do I think all of my children are worthy of love? Yes. Is there a person in the world I think wouldn't be worthy of love? No. So
why would you not be?
Have I decided I'm not?
Yeah.
And you stop and think about it, and you're like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. It made sense back then, but I've just been living out of it. And so when you really wrestle with it, and you really get a hold of what's more true, in that, what brings me to want to be around certain people, it's because they just show up in the moment, and the way they give themselves to the moment, it makes that moment so worthy. You feel so loved, you feel so connected.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, so when I'm thinking I'm not worthy of love, I shrink back and I pull away and I start making the moment draining and unloving and, all of that. But when I show up and give myself and let love flow through me, everybody in that moment gets to experience love.
Yeah.
Worth is
amazing.
We don't get to decide what we're worth or if we're worthy. That was decided when we were given life. And as long as I'm here, I'm worthy to show up in a moment and experience love if I want to offer it.
Yeah, I love that. So, and then I will wrap up. But do you find that, like, for me, I think that I've done this work so much when I've hit like really hard patches in my life, right? And like I've noticed recently that I'm like feeling really good and I'm really happy and I'm like, I don't really want to do the work now. Like I'm so tired of doing it. Like I feel like, it's like one thing when, at least for me, when I was in it and really sad, it's like oxygen, it felt like to me. Like when I was really in it, it's like I wanted to talk all the time. I wanted to write all the time. Like I wanted to get in and dig around and see what was wrong. And it's certainly when things come up, like I said, like I have more tools, And I do certain things, like I do reflection circles with Paige and I do stuff like that. But yeah, it's like, how do you keep that, the maintenance of that,
Yeah.
It's like we haven't had a call in a while because I've been good.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's the answer,
I do think we go through seasons.
Yeah.
And, I'm committed to do the work for my lifetime because I've faced the hellish of hells and I don't want to do that again. And at the same time, I'm shocked at how natural it is to fall back asleep, right? So I wound up experiencing I've been doing the work for
Yeah, because I know
12
from
years.
talking to you over the years, like I know you're always doing something with
and
something.
I journal a lot and I do a lot, and I have gotten pretty consistent coaching for 10 years or so. And in January, I started recognizing I felt depressed, and I was like, what is happening? Where is this coming from?
All this work.
Yeah. And, I wanted to blame my husband and, all these things. And so I really just started looking at where am I unaware? What am I not aware
Back
of?
to awareness.
And I was struggling to sleep. I was dealing with insomnia. And so I feel like I'm in a huge awakening. There's just so much coming alive in me. And I realized that what happened was, like, through COVID and through, we were in COVID going through empty nest, had a, painful scenario that we partially contributed with the house and different things that happened that were painful. And I was afraid, and I kind of started gradually, slowly pulling back. Like, I don't need to journal today. It's not that big a deal. I'm fine. And I started going more and more through the motions, and I couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
And until the depression hit, and I'm like, I'm not a depressed person. What is going on? And so it's brought me to recognize how much I must create community, how much we need community, because I also had started pulling away from friends and didn't realize it. And so I'm working very diligently to, one, work through some of the things that have gotten revealed, and two, really have a community around me where they know without a shadow of a doubt, I need you to call me out at any time when you are seeing this. And that's what they want in their lives. And I've got some with family. I've got my family, and so my sisters, so my extended family, and then my own core family. We are doing a lot of work to really come together in a way that we can speak honest truth and address things when they're small. And then I'm working to build several different core friend groups that I'm like, look, here's me. And this is how you know when I am pulling back. And when you see these things, you are the people I want surrounding me and calling me out. Because we are the best deceivers of ourselves. Yeah. And when we're deceiving ourselves, we are deceiving ourselves to make ourselves not see what we're up to. Yeah. And so I really believe we're meant and wired for community. And then there's therapy and coaching and different things that help and we need at different seasons. And
wow, it's so good. I feel like there's so much good stuff in here for people. And if people want to hire, you're so busy, I shouldn't even say this, because I know whenever I'm trying to book with you, it's quite hard. But if people want to look you up, I feel like you put a lot of really great stuff out on your Instagram that's really helpful.
Yes.
It's Hey Julia Woods.
Hey Julia Woods.
Hey Julia Woods. So if you're interested in learning from Julia, which you're so amazing and brilliant, and I am so grateful for all the help that you've given me over the years.
Thank you.
You can find her at it's Julia Woods.
Hey Julia Woods.
Hey Julia Woods.
And also on YouTube and my podcast, same. Hey Julia Woods is all three of those places. And I actually am expanding things where I can take on more people and support more people in other ways that are really
now I feel like
helpful.
I should get back on your calendar.
That is totally your choice.
Talia's going to call you after this. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for being so honest and open and raw and messy.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me journey with you in life. And
well, I ask every guest at the end what they think the secret to a happy life is. I think so.
Yeah. Curiosity.
Curiosity. Mm-hmm. That's so good.
It's what we have.
I think that changes everything.
Yeah. Curiosity like a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
If we keep curiosity like a 5-year-old throughout our life, we'll stay in wonder, we'll stay in awareness, we'll stay in questioning and in a growth mindset.
I feel like that is what got me through so much like heartache with my son. That was like when people asked me like how I dealt with all of that when my son was in rehab and all that, I was like, I just got really curious and asked him question after question after question without giving him my point of view. Just questions and curiosity. Yeah.
Because where we're stuck, wherever we get stuck in life, it's because we're stuck thinking the same things. And curiosity helps us start thinking new thoughts that produce different results
Yeah.
and get us up and out of where we're stuck.
Love it. Curiosity. That might be my favorite answer yet. Thank you, Julia.
Yes, thank you.